I'm Luciana Fragali, and today we're going to talk about the need of changing your designer in the middle of the project. If it happens, how it happens, and what's involved in that. A mid-project switch is possible. It involves a lot of different parts that you have to think about, especially depending on the financial agreement you have, how much of the work that was supposed to be done has already been done, how much is left to be done. Once you go through the financial part, you have to remember that by changing your designer, you may have to change your general contractor, unless you come to an agreement with a general contractor that you're going to continue without that designer, which the general contractor may be happy about or not very happy about. I have been involved in this 20 years in many different projects that I had to take over from a client that wasn't happy with the previous designer. And what I try to do is, there is a lot of frustration there, right? And if we're not careful, we're going to spend the majority of time talking about what the other designer has done wrong, instead of looking forward and thinking, how are we going to have a different experience and where we have to focus on. So let's just move ahead and not look back. That's what I try to do. Obviously, there's a period of time that they have to talk about it. You entertain the conversation for half a day, and then from then on, we have to move forward, understand what has been already done in terms of drawings, in terms of purchases, in terms of the finance of the project, how you stand right now at that specific point, actually, and then move forward. That's the only one direction to go to, is forward. You know, a client decides to hire a designer for the wrong reasons. Maybe because that designer is super famous, or maybe because that designer did a project for a friend of them that went really well, and you love the look of the project, so you think, oh, I'm going to use the same designer. But you have to remember that a designer is not only supposed to create beautiful things, we're supposed to execute what we create as well. And that's the part that a lot of people miss, because they buy the dream, they buy the idea, they buy the look, but they don't really understand what's behind all that. The reason that people come to the conclusion they have to change is because their expectations are not being met. And then they have to try and understand if their expectations were ever realistic, if they were promised things that have not been delivered, or, you know, anything else that basically matters to you as a client that it's not happening in this relationship. The reasons can be, you know, the finances. If you get into a project that doesn't have a budget study, that designer is going to think that you have endless budget, and the designer is going to start increasing the cost of the project daily, basically. And that's one of the reasons that it's going to get to a point that you're going to realize that designer cannot execute what they created with the budget that have been stipulated. So I think a budget study is one of the reasons. Another reason is the designer seemed to have a team in place that the team had different responsibilities in the project, and then you realize that your designer is basically outsourcing all that. So when this is outsourced, the margin for errors is much higher, rather than having a designer that has an office with the right amount of people that not only create the project but can execute the project with you and do many other things that are involved in actually succeeding in an interior design project. Another reason can be timing. You spoke with the designer, you discussed the scope of work, and the designer told you, oh, that can be done in 3 months. Sometimes they actually believe they can do it 3 months, and sometimes they want to get the project and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. So that's a major problem with these relationships between client and designers, because the designers are going to tell you what you want to hear. Then you realize that everybody else is telling you that it's not possible, but the designer is telling you that it's possible, and you're trusting that designer, and then it's not possible, because it doesn't depend only on the designer. It depends on the city, it depends on the building sometimes when it's a building, it depends on your neighbors, it depends on your general contractor and his subcontractors. in the purchases that are made, in the stores that are delivering the purchases. So how can the designer tell you exactly how long it's going to take? Unless they have a lot of experience, they have done very similar scope of works in the past, and they know everything else that is involved in actually succeeding with this project, then you're gonna have a problem, and you're gonna want to change designers, because then that designer is no longer trustworthy. When I take over a project nowadays, it has to be a very special project, because it's a nightmare for any designer to get into a project that has already been created by somebody else and half executed by somebody else. If I take a project like this, the first thing I'm going to do is understand everything that has been done and try to make sense of it, which sometimes it doesn't make sense. So I try not to have my ego involved, because as a creative person, I don't want to be criticizing anybody else's work. But I can guarantee that 3/4 of what was created before I would have done somehow differently. But I'm not gonna tell my client, just let's demolish everything and start over, because that's not realistic, right? So we have to understand what I can live with and continue, and what I think is completely wrong, out of code, badly executed, installations are horrible. There are things that I cannot live with. And I will make sure that the client understands that. And then it's their choice to move forward or change. It's not easy to inherit something from somebody else. And I have had designers from different parts of the world approaching me and saying, I'm designing this project, would you execute it for me? And I usually to take those, of course, because you learn with them as well. But nowadays, I prefer to create my own executions. I think that the chances of that being, what I had envisioned from the beginning are much higher than executing somebody else's creativity. Sometimes the client didn't fire their previous designer because they didn't like what they did. Most of the time is the execution. Sometimes they feel like this guy is not understanding what I'm saying. I need to change the designer because I'm never gonna get them to visualize what I'm visualizing. That happens too. So when that happens, I have to take over, if I take over, and let's just be more practical and understand where we are and where we're heading and how long it's going to take and how much more it's going to cost. But try not to, criticize what has happened in the past. Whatever it is, let's change the energy. Let's get the wheels rolling and let's make it happen. Not overwhelming the client when we reassess budget and timing is practically impossible, because the reason they're changing designers to begin with is most likely because of budget and timing. So when I say the truth, which I know that is the truth because I have been doing this for 20 years, and even though I want to make you happy, I also need to be transparent with you. Sometimes you're not going to like it as my client, because I will tell you, as far as my knowledge goes, I will tell you exactly how long it's going to take to finish that project and how much more it's going to cost. And the only thing you're going to get from me is the truth. I think the clients feel very relieved that there is a light in the end of the tunnel when they realize how structured Design Solutions is and all the departments we have to successfully execute a project. I feel like they feel comfortable, they feel relieved, they feel confident that they're gonna get something done, and it's gonna be organized for once. I think that once the clients sit down with us and they realize how we operate, how clear the process is, how visible it is. For instance, our 3D renderings are very close to reality. And I think that gives people confidence to agree with a lot of our ideas. And when they get the product in the end and they compare to the rendering, it's hard to say which one is real. And I make sure that to do that for everybody, because I want to surprise people, but with little things. I don't want people to, we used our library of 3D pieces to do your 3D rendering just to give you a feel of what's going to be. I mean, I heard that many times, especially by developers that sell spec home. They have these amazing renderings and then they show the potential buyers and they love it. They fall in love with it. And when you see what's included in the contract of the spec home, the majority of what you see on the 3D is not included. So that to me is deceiving the client, and Design Solutions does not do that. The way we structure our budget, we separate everything that is fixed in the house from what's movable. So you know exactly how much you're investing in that property. Things you're not going to be able to take with you, like woodwork and your kitchen and your bathroom, vanities and showers. And so that part of the project is phase one. And then we come with everything else that can be removed if you sell the house. The way we execute our projects, we have a person from our team every single day at the job site. So we know everything that is going on. If there is a problem with our drawings versus reality, if there is an unforeseen condition, you're going to have someone from our team there every single day communicating with us, aside from us visiting the job site multiple times a week. So I think that when the client sees all that, and you know, most of all, how passionate and loving we are when it comes to what we do, that's, I think, the main characteristic that makes the client feels absolutely comfortable very fast with Design Solutions.